Interacting with others away from home. Older siblings should love and care for the younger ones. Younger siblings should love and respect the older ones. Getting along well with one's siblings is a sign of respecting one's parents and caring that they are happy. Children are showing their love for their parents when they are loyal to one another and get along well. By caring for and helping one another, children relieve their parents' concerns for them and thus make their parents happy. And few things make parents happier than hearing their children laughing merrily together and seeing them care for one another. Parents know that while friends may come and go, brothers and sisters are for life. Let's see how Jason learned how helpful a big brother can be. Things are often not what they seem. Jason's big brother, Patrick, had just received permission to go hiking with his friends on Lookout Mountain. When Jason heard that, he got all excited and wanted to go along with them. Patrick, can I please come with you? Please, please, please. Patrick shook his head and said in his big brother voice, No, Jason, not up the mountain. This trail is much tougher than you're used to. There's more climbing on this one. Jason was hurt. He admired his brother and liked to do things with him. But lately, Patrick has been spending time with his friends, Alec and Hung. Jason was afraid that Patrick preferred his new friends to him. You just don't want me along, he sputtered. Patrick looked at Jason, then at Alec and Hung, who were close by waiting for him. They had quite a ways to go and needed to get started. He explained, Jason, there are some things you do with your friends and some things I do with mine. This hike is one of them. Plus, it's too dangerous for you. I have to go with the guys now. See you later. Jason became even more upset and embarrassed. His older brother, in front of his friends, had just told Jason that he wasn't good enough to go on the hike. But Patrick and his friends were only a few years older. How could it be okay for them, but dangerous for him? Dejected, Jason watched the three go off. Watching them walk down the road laughing together, he wondered if they were laughing at him. Suddenly, he had an idea. He'd follow them, and when they turned around to come back, he'd popped out from behind a tree or a rock and surprised them. Then they see he was good enough to go along with them. Jason hurried to follow them. The walking wasn't hard at all. He had been on the path before with Patrick and knew the way well. Then he saw them take the trail near the big rock. So this is where they were going. This was so great. He could follow them easily. There was nothing dangerous about this trail. After several minutes, he saw a stream with a fallen tree trunk over the stream. He ran across it. Now he was feeling really confident. He could hear Patrick and the others, so he knew he was keeping up. He went around a bend and saw a stone ledge up ahead. It was steeper than any he had climbed before, but he was sure he could do it. He began to climb and realized it was actually trickier than it looked. There were loose stones all along the way. Jason put his hand up to hold on to the ledge. He really had to stretch out to put his foot onto the next outcropping. But some of the stones were loose and they shifted under him. He couldn't hold on. As he fell, he cried out. Luckily, he landed on some low bushes, and they cushioned his fall. But he felt a sharp pain. It was his foot. Then he heard a voice. Jason, is that you? It was Patrick calling down to him. Are you okay? Jason, breathless and in pain, managed to get out, I'm okay. Patrick quickly climbed down to him. Alec and Hung were right behind him. Patrick kneeled to check Jason's arm and legs. But when he touched Jason's foot, Jason gave a very loud ow. It doesn't look broken, but you probably twisted it. Don't worry, you'll be fine. Relieved that it was nothing serious, Patrick sat back on his heels and with that angrily demanded, Why did you follow us? I told you not to. What were you thinking? Jason didn't know what hurt the most, the pain, his embarrassment, or Patrick yelling at him. I wanted to come with you. I thought you said it was too dangerous only because you didn't want me around. He tried to get up, and the pain got much worse. Ow! Patrick, I can't walk. Patrick got over his anger as quickly as it had arisen. Actually, he had been more scared than angry. He had been worried Jason was really hurt. It's okay, Jason. I'll carry you home. He turned to his friends and told them to go on without him. But they said they would go back with the two brothers. They had enough excitement for one day. Alex said, Take it from someone with an older brother, Jason. It may not feel like it sometimes, but they're usually looking out for us. And most of the time, they know what they're talking about. Then he winked at Jason, but it can be really frustrating at times. Carrying Jason's piggyback, Patrick started back down the trail. Jason looked at their house way in the distance and gulped. Wow, it's so far, Patrick said. Don't worry, we'll make it just fine, you and me together. With respect and love, siblings become our best friends. When siblings value family ties more than possessions, resentment will not rise. When siblings are careful with their words, feelings of anger naturally dissolve. If we're not careful, we may find ourselves saying things that hurt our brothers and sisters. Or even worse, we may find ourselves fighting and not speaking to one another because we're arguing over family possessions. This is what happened to Mr. Joseph's family. But then one day, he found a way to change everything with Mr. Joseph's special chess. Although Mr. Joseph had 3 sons, he was very lonely because they rarely came to visit him. And when they did visit, it was always by themselves because they didn't get along. Every visit was the same. They would spend all the time talking about themselves and telling him how busy they were. Then they had run out of things to tell him. They would then ask how he was. But as soon as he began to tell them, they would make an excuse to leave. They never spent time listening to him, never asked if there was anything they could do for him, or even asked how his day was. Mr. Joseph was getting older, so he had plenty of time to consider his situation. He rarely saw his sons, and he wanted to change that. He also wanted them to get along better and look after one another like he and his own brothers had done. He began to plan a way to make all this happen. First, he bought a chest with a lock and put the chest in his sitting room. Then he brought home several rocks from the nearby forest. So that the rocks wouldn't make any noise, he carefully wrapped them in some rags and then put them in the chest. He put the key to the lock on a string and wore it around his neck. Next, he got a lot of pennies, which he placed in several bags. These he also put in a chest. He made sure the bags had plenty of room for the coins to clink against each other, should the chest be moved. For a final touch, he bought an expensive chair. The chair was an extravagance for him, but necessary for his plan. And then he patiently waited. His youngest son was the first to visit. He immediately noticed the locked chest, the key on the string around his father's neck, and the new chair his father was sitting on. When he asked about him, his father said he had received a generous offer for the forest behind the house and so sold it. In fact, he had received so much money that he splurged on the chair as a comfort for his old age. The rest of the money was in a chest where he could keep an eye on it. The key opened the lock, so he wore it for safekeeping. When Mr. Joseph's son thought his father wasn't looking, he nudged the chest with his foot. It didn't move, but he heard the clinking of coins. Then he eyed the new chair. If his thrifty father had spent money on such an expensive chair, he must have indeed received a lot for the land. He decided he would come to visit his father more often. Then the middle son came by, and he also noticed the chest, the key, and the chair. Asking about them, he received the same explanation his brother got. He also tested the chest with the same results and eyed the new chair. Like his brother, he decided he would visit his father more often. After some time, the oldest son also came for a visit. Like his two brothers, he asked about the new possessions and learned of his father's good fortune. After nudging the chest and checking out the chair, he too decided to visit more often. As the three each began to call on their father more often, they began to spend more time talking with him and listening to what he had to say. They even helped out doing things around the house. They also found out what food he liked and brought it to him when they visited. This continued for some time until one night Mr. Joseph passed away peacefully in his sleep. His sons were told of their father's passing, and they all came to the house that very day. They quickly found the key among his clothes and went to the chest. With barely contained excitement, they unlocked it and lifted the lid. The oldest brother took out the bags and dumped their contents on the table. The three stared at the pile of pennies. Then they reached into the chest to take out the rags and their heavy contents. When placed on a table, the cloth fell away to reveal the rocks. In shock, the three looked at each other. They became very angry. Then the eldest brother shook his head and admitted that he only started to visit more because of the chess. The other two brothers said the same. Realizing what their father had done, the eldest brother said that he must have been really lonely. The three brothers began to feel ashamed. For all those years they had neglected their father. They had only cared for him when they thought he had a lot of money. And to make matters worse, each had visited him secretly in hopes that they would get more of the money. They had been jealous brothers as well as bad sons. This was not the way their father had brought them up. With a heavy heart, the youngest brother bent over the chest to close it, but saw something that he had been carved in the bottom of it. They all moved closer and read the inscription together. A family's greatest wealth is its members' love for one another. When drinking, eating, walking, or sitting, let elders do so first. Younger ones follow. When an elder is asking for someone, find that person right away. If we cannot find that person, we should immediately report back and ask if we can help instead. Very simply, we are to treat people, especially our elders, with respect and kindness. Why? When we respect others, they are happy, and we are happy too. Also, when we let elders go first, we are learning to be less selfish and more humble, as well as more considerate of others. It's just the right thing to do. What are some of the many ways that we can let our elders go first? At meal times, instead of taking our food right away, we should ask them to help themselves first, instead of taking the best seat for ourselves. We can let them choose where they want to sit. If we're getting into an elevator, we should first let the riders exit, then allow our elders to enter before us. If we are out with someone who is older, instead of running on ahead, we can walk with her. When going through a doorway, we can hold the door so our elders can pass through before us. Also, if an elder, for example, our teacher, asks us to find someone and we cannot, we should go back and let the person know. Then we can ask if there is anything we can do for the person. When addressing elders, do not call them by their first name. When in the presence of elders, do not show off. When meeting elders whom we know, greet them promptly and respectfully. If they do not greet us in return, respectfully stand aside. When we say hello to an elder, someone more than a few years older than us, it's much more polite to address them by Mr. or Ms. and their last name. If they are good friends of our parents, we can call them aunt or uncle, followed by their first name. This way, we treat them respectfully. If we greet someone and they don't return the greeting, don't make a fuss. Their minds may be somewhere else. What is important is that we were polite in saying hello. Also, we shouldn't show off. If we're busy showing off or bragging, we won't have time to listen. So more than likely, we won't be learning from our elders. Even worse, we may end up irritating them. Also, when we show off, others cannot talk to one another because we're being rude and loud. And children and adults who are rude and loud do not get invited to fun places. Plus, no one wants to be friends with a show-off. Try this out. Try smiling at an elder tomorrow and notice how you feel. If we are in a vehicle and see an elder whom we know passing by, we should get out and greet the person if the situation safely allows. We continue on our way only after the elder has left us. In the past, people rode in carts and wagons or on horseback. It would have been rude to remain seated in a wagon or on your horse when someone who was older was on the ground. We can do the same today if we're on our bike and it is safe to stop and get off. This way, we can say hello courteously to the other person instead of rushing by with just a quick wave. Also, in the past, as the elder was leaving, those who were younger would wait until the elder had gone some distance. Why? Driving off first would have been like saying the younger person was more important than the elder. Also, if the wagon went through a puddle, it could splash mud on the elder person on the ground. So it was polite to wait till the elder had gone a good distance before leaving. Even in today's busy world, we should let the older person walk off first before we turn and walk away. Do you think this is too much of a bother? How would you feel if you turned to wave goodbye to someone and they were already rushing off? Now think of how you would feel if they were still standing there smiling and waving to you. You would feel good because they were still thinking of you and not themselves. When an elder is standing, do not sit. After an elder sits down, sit only when invited to do so. Before an elder, speak softly. But if our voice is too low and hard to hear, we are being improper. One very good way to show respect is to remain standing as long as an elder is standing. Only after the elder sits down and invites others to sit should we do so. Another way to show respect is to not talk so softly that people cannot hear us. What about talking too loudly? This can get us into even more trouble. How so? Read on to see how one crow learned that making too much noise can have severe consequences. Why crows only say caw, caw? A very long time ago, all birds were silent. They didn't know why this was so, just that it had always been that way. They were very sad about this because all the other animals could talk. Only the birds were mute. Then one day, a fascinating bird appeared. He was as brightly colored as a rainbow. But that was not what really amazed the other birds. As they all clustered around to look on in awe, he began to talk, and what he said astounded them. He told them He had come at the order of the sound giver. It was the sound giver's job to decide what would be the best sound for each animal. Once decided, the sound would belong to that animal and no other. Much to the distress of the sound giver, she just learned she had never given the birds their sounds. She was coming now to correct her terrible mistake. With that, the sound giver came into the clearing. She was a little girl. She apologized to all the birds for their terrible oversight. She told them she would do something to make up for their being silent so long, something she had never done before. She would allow them to exchange their sound if they did not like it. As the sound giver looked around, she saw a little finch excitedly hopping up and down. The sound giver smiled, held out her hand, and the finch started chirping. All the birds were thrilled and quickly lined up to receive their very own sounds. The sound giver began to carefully work her way through the line. Some birds liked the sound she gave them, while others politely asked for another. She gave many birds more than one sound. Others she taught to sing. She patiently worked with each one until it was happy. Then it was time for the crow. He marched up to the sound giver and glared at her. The sound giver gave him a single call to see how it sounded. The crow repeatedly, loudly, then more loudly, and then even louder yet. The sound giver winced, put her hands over her ears, and asked the crow to please speak more softly. But the noisy bird called louder yet, and even demanded he be given more sounds. He was so loud that the sound giver shook her head and said no. Call, call, squawked the crow, as if demanding, why not? The sound giver calmly looked the crow in the eye. You are loud and rude. Because of this, I will only give you one sound. The soft calls of other birds will delight all those who hear them, and they will be welcome. But you will not. People will cringe at your call and shoo you away because you are so loud. And this is why even today, the only sound a crow can make is call, call. When meeting elders, walk briskly towards them. When leaving, do not do so in haste. When answering a question, look attentively at the person. We should regard our aunts and uncles as if they were our parents, and our cousins as if they were our siblings. When walking towards someone who is older, do so with enthusiasm and a smile. When it is time to leave, walk away at a slower pace. If we do the opposite, approach slowly but leave quickly, the person might think we didn't want to see him or her. How would you feel if someone dragged their feet while coming toward you and then rushed off? You would probably feel hurt. So to avoid hurting others, approach a little more quickly and leave more slowly. As we greet the person, we should shake hands and make eye contact. If we fidget and look around, When someone is speaking to us, the person might think we're not interested in what they're saying. Making eye contact indicates we're paying attention. When it's our turn to talk, the person will be more attentive to what we say. If during the conversation, another person joins in and begins to speak, look at that person too. By listening politely and attentively, others will respond in the same way to us. When others are talking, don't interrupt. We should patiently wait until it is our turn to speak. This is especially important when the other person is older than us. If we interrupt those who are talking, we could miss hearing something important. Others could too. Also, when we are rude and don't listen politely to others, others won't listen to us. With our aunts and uncles, we are to behave as if we were with our parents. We should respectfully listen to them and follow what they say when they ask us to do something. With our cousins, we should treat them as we've been taught to treat our siblings. Try this out. The next time an adult is talking to you, look the person in the eye and pay attention to what he or she is saying. When it's time to respond, do so politely. The person will know you were really listening when you ask a question about what they had just said. Now notice how they listen to you when you begin to speak. See if you notice any difference from before when you didn't listen as carefully.